Hi, this is PR Frank, and today we're going to take a look at using HTML and CSS templates for a start when you're trying to design a website. So I'm going to take a look at how to do that in a text editor like Brackets, and then I'm going to show you how to do it in Dreamweaver. So the first thing you might want to do is go to the internet and search free HTML templates. And once the page loads, I would skip any ads. As you can see, I went with this templated.co, but there are plenty of other options out there. So if I click on this, it just so happens the very first one is the one I chose. If you scroll through a site, you can see lots of other options. But let's go with this one. It's just called Industrious, and it has a download button. Once it's downloaded, you can double click, and it opens a folder. If you're on a PC, you may have to extract it. Let's go see how it looks. If I double click the index page, it'll open in my browser window, and it's kind of a continuous scroll page with some nice background images, some beautiful sections, and a nice footer with all of the social media elements. Over here is a menu, and if you click it, it drops out to the other pages, which have some other features that you can borrow as well. But getting back to the home page here, this is the one that we're going to mess with a little bit today. Let's go ahead and open up this index page in our text editor. I'm using Brackets. If you take a look at the HTML structure, you can see that it's got an HTML with a head, of course, and in the body, we've got a header, a nav, and a bunch of sections that are labeled with comments to explain what they are. And at the very bottom, of course, we have our footer section as well. And if we preview this right now, we can see this is what it looks like. There's a nice video with a drone in the back. It says Industrious, and as I showed before, it's got a fly-out menu here with a dark background, and lots of different things. So let's start by changing some colors, okay? So when we change the colors of our site, we can do it one at a time. So up here at the top, there's this really dark black bar up here, and I want to go to my web, and I like Adobe's color site is very easy. color.adobe.com. If I click on the trends part of that web page, I can see the kind of color trends that people are using in the fashion industry, illustration industry, etc. But let's make this into a wilderness page. I kind of like these greens. If I'm logged into my Adobe account, I can add it to my library. But since I'm working with a text editor right now, that library is not going to help me so much. I'll just go ahead and click on that, and then it brings up all the hexadecimal color codes for that color scheme. It's very nice. I'll make my top black bar into this green. So I'll just choose copy, but just by clicking on it, and you'll see it says copy to clipboard, which is very handy. Come back over to Brackets, and as I scroll through, it looks like that first section is an ID called header. And I'm going to need to target that. So I'm looking for an ID called header in my CSS. So if I open the CSS file that comes with this template, you can see that it's got thousands of lines of code for CSS. But the nice thing is it's searchable. So I can do Command F or Control F on a PC, and I can type in my search. I know I'm looking for an ID called header. Okay, there's one. It's actually the second one, so let me go to the first one. Here it is. This is all the stuff that styles the header. And I'm looking for background or background color, and there it is, background. So it's this dark black right now, and I just want to select this and paste over it with the hexadecimal color code that I copied. And you can see immediately the feedback we have in our preview is that that bar has been turned into a dark green. So that's really great. That's easy. I can save that to keep that change. And now let's work on making this gradient match. In order to find this gradient, we may have to either look in that section or search for the word gradient in our CSS. Let's just try searching for the word gradient. As we can see, we've got a background image linear gradient, and we can test it out a little bit. I can change this to a 1, and we can see what happened. That's not the linear gradient for that section, but if we keep looking, for the word gradient, I'm sure we'll find another one. And now there's this background after. You know, maybe this is where we need to change some things. Let me make this the green. And as you can see, that's targeted it. So it takes a little bit of troubleshooting to figure these things out. I found a couple of different gradients. They didn't work for this, but I eventually found this banner after selector and changed just the first color here in the gradient. And it's done a nice job of keeping that green that we had. So since I'm changing this to sort of a nature theme, it might be a good idea to go out and get an image that is a nice background for nature. And it's a good idea if you're messing with a template to work with the same sizing of images. So let me just go into our folder, into images, and here is the banner MP4, right? And this is a 1920 by 1080 video, MP4. So I can go out to the web and I can search for nature looping video 1920 by 1080 download. I mean, this is a search I can do. Let's see, free stock nature footage. Let's go check it out. We can drop this down and choose free clips, for example. It's only going to show us the free ones. Okay. And so I want to try to find something that has to do with nature. I'm really liking these pine trees here. So let me click this. Okay. So this is a QuickTime movie, which is not terrible. I hope it still works. It's called Forest 15:2. I'm just going to call it Forest. And I like to use all lowercase so that I don't make any capitalization errors. And I need to put it in the same location as the site template that I downloaded. So it's deep here in my web design folder, and it's in this templated industrious images. And here was the original one called banner.mp4. This is going to be called forest.mov because that's the extension for QuickTime. Now what we do is we go back over to brackets, we go to our index, and we see how it's in there. So it looks like for our banner, we see here, there's the source. It's a video tag, and it has all these attributes, and it looks in our images folder, and it finds banner, but we don't want that. So we can just delete that back. If we hit slash again, it's going to give us all of our choices, including forest.mov. Fantastic. I save that. I can go look at our preview, and now we should be, okay. So this, because it's a responsive site, it was at kind of at a different width, which was not showing the forest. But at full width, it's going to show our forest. For now, this is looking really good. It's green. It's got a green gradient. We're flying over the trees. Let's change some text because it is no longer industrious. In our index, we don't want to call it industrious by templated. Let's call it naturally. Not naturally, but naturally by PR Frank. And if I scroll down, of course, my header should say naturally. Okay, and my banner, it's going to be a huge H1 that's going to say naturally. All right, so I can save that. And as you can see, now my site is looking very naturally. Let's mess with the menu before we get out of here. If I click the menu button, it flies out to this dark black menu here with my different pages. So how do we change the background of a flyout menu that we cannot see? Well, it's rather easy a lot of times because we're just looking for the nav section. If we look here, this is our nav. The ID is called menu. So there's probably an ID somewhere in our CSS that tells us what the background color should be. So let's go over to our CSS and let's search for menu. And as you can see, there's lots of items called menu. I'm just looking for menu all by itself. There it is. Background color is straight ones, but I want to make it that green, that light green again that I've already copied. It's still kind of on my clipboard there, so I was able to paste it. If I save that and move back over here, you see now my menu is that nice green. I hope you get the idea of how challenging it can be, but how nice it can be to work with something that somebody's already created that you enjoy the look and feel of. And we could continue on this site, adding and changing things to match our nature theme, but I hope you get the idea how you can attack a site like this. Now let's look at the exact same thing in Adobe Dreamweaver. Before I do this in Dreamweaver, however, I have to change a couple of things. So let me close these, and I'm going to go to my files, and I'm just going to rename this one brackets, because it's the one I did in brackets. And I'm going to take my zip file and launch it again, and now I'm back to my normal site, the industrious site with the red gradient. Now I'm ready to use that in Dreamweaver. So here we go over to Dreamweaver. So in Dreamweaver, the very first thing you have to do, I can't stress it enough, is go to your Files tab, drop this folder down, and go to Manage Sites. If you don't set up your site first, you're going to have a mess of code, especially when it comes to images. So it's really important to go to Manage Sites, click New Site, and make one. And let's call this the Naturally site. We're going to browse for it. And here it is, the templated industrious. I'm going to choose that. And it's always important to go into advanced settings to local and tell it where the images folder is. I can't stress how important this is as well, because if I'm bringing pictures in here, it's not going to know where to put them unless I tell it where my images folder is. If I had to hand this off to somebody else later and I didn't define my images folder there in my managed sites, it would be a big mess. So I'll click on Done. As you can see, all my files are there in my Files menu. Let's go ahead and double click on Index. Now I have it in split view with Live turned on. Now there's two different versions. I can look at Live or I can look at Design. And as you can see, Design does not represent my site at all. So let's keep on Live so we can see what we're working with. And up here at the top, this green bar represents the responsive code that's put in there at different widths, and things would change. And if you want to see how it changes, you can grab this grabber bar here and move it to see how it may change at different widths. Okay. We're just going to keep it all the way wide for now, and you can mess with those different widths and what changes with those in those different styles if you really get into this. Now, with Dreamweaver, you can see how many files it takes to make this page work. There's the source code or the HTML, the CSS, CSS for the fonts, and then 5 different JavaScript files that make this work. So there's a lot going on here to make this work. And you are limited to changing the things that you understand how to change or learn how to do them. So first, let's go to our source code and let's just click on something we want to change. Remember how we changed this dark black bar up here in our text editor? Well, let's click that, and it's highlighted, and as you can see, it's the header. Our CSS designer can help us out a lot here. So in my CSS designer, I want to make sure to not have all of my CSS, all of my style files selected, but only the current one. And it shows me header is what's selected. And oftentimes this show set is unchecked. I like to check it because now this shows me exactly what styles are applied to the header. And as you can see, if I go down here to all the way to background, there's that 111111, which indicates a very dark color. But I can go out to my colors that I've picked from the Adobe Color site, and I could copy that, or as I mentioned earlier, if I'm logged in, and I am logged in to the Adobe site here, I can click Add to Library. So if I click that, and I come back over to Dreamweaver, and I look at my CC libraries, you can see that the wilderness colors that I found on the Adobe Color site are added right here inside of Dreamweaver. That's very helpful. I can click on it right here in Dreamweaver. As you can see, that color has been copied. Actually, I want this darker one. It's been copied. Switch back over to my CSS Designer panel. There's the background color. I'm going to paste that in. And as you can see, it changes to that dark green that we wanted. Also, I should point out that this DOM panel here can be helpful to kind of show you the structure of the site. Okay, so right now we are in the header. So if I click on header, you can see that it selects not only that code and that section up here in the split view, but also it selects the selector in the CSS designer panel and shows you what's being affected by that. Okay, so the other thing that we did is we changed the video in the background here. And one of the things I like to have on down here, which is not on by default, is the properties panel. So let me get that, properties, and it'll float at first, but you can grab it and you can dock it down here. Once you see this blue line, then it's docked. So with this selected, you can see that my source is this banner MP4, and I can click on the folder next to it and it'll show all of the videos in my images folder. But it's not actually letting us bring the forest MOV in. It would let us bring the banner MP4 in, but maybe because it's an MOV, it's not. So you run into a few problems like this from time to time in Dreamweaver. So now what I can do is I go to my files panel, into my images, you can see forest is there. So this little guy is like a target. If I point to the file with it, it knows which file I want. And it replaces it now with this. You'll notice it's not updating. However, if I switch from live to design and back to live, it should start showing us. So I'm guessing what happened here is Dreamweaver added an attribute, an extra attribute. And Dreamweaver can do this from time to time, and it can really be maddening. But right here you can see type video was added by Dreamweaver when I changed that file. So I'm just going to delete that attribute and save it. And let's see if we switch from live to design and back to live again. Dreamweaver just doesn't like that QuickTime file. Maybe if it was an MP4 it would work. So it's a lot of troubleshooting here. If we preview this, it should work. Yeah, there we go. So now we're flying over that forest. So now what we have to do is we have to change this gradient here. And so we switch back over to Dreamweaver. Dreamweaver doesn't like to deal with gradients very well. And so then what I have to do is I have to go into my code. This is why it's important to know code before you use Dreamweaver. Otherwise, sometimes it's really impossible. And let me just search. I can do Command F or Control F on a PC once again and search for gradient. And I can try to find that gradient. There it was. So I want to change this color here. So once again, I'll go to my CC libraries. There's that copied. I come change this red one to green. And now we have that nice green. All right, so the last thing, besides just changing our text here, let's just do that. Changing our text here, all we have to do is just click in there and type. We can even be in live view and type, which is kind of nice. Okay. There we go. Our menu. Now, if I click the menu in live view, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't open up or anything. The secret to doing these flyouts is that when you're in your CSS designer and you find the thing you want, and it's menu. So if I click menu, now that menu pops out. Okay, so I found in nav, here's my menu system, and it pops out. And it doesn't look black. It is black, and maybe this is supposed to represent that, but it's really not being represented well here by Dreamweaver. But just know that it's black back there, and here it is. And we can change that to the other color. If we go to CC Libraries, click on the light green one, it's copied. I'll move back over to CSS Designer, and I'll replace this background color with that green. Now, if I click on the color swatch, I can add it. I can click this plus sign, and now I've got the color swatches just right here. So it makes it as easy as flying that out instead of having to switch back and forth between your library and the CSS Designer. But you can continually add your colors here, and you can just have some color pickers to choose from. So once again, it doesn't look good, but if I save it and I preview it in my browser, saving everything, you can see when I fly that out, it has a nice background. But as you can see, it's there are some advantages and disadvantages. Dreamweaver could ignore some things that you want to do. It could make your life complicated, But if you pick the right template and you know what's happening with code, it can be a nice way to start. So I hope that's helpful in helping you decide whether to go with a template or not, and maybe which templates you should use or maybe which ones you should stay away from.